Hello everyone and welcome back to another video from Navis Nobilite. As time gets closer and closer to when I'm going to be very distracted by things like my child being born, I have to find new ways to get you guys content without making it too terribly drab and boring. And I recently saw a nice video over on the Great Book of Grudges, and I thought, maybe I should actually make a tier list of the navies in Battlefleet Gothic, and I thought it would be a fun time, and it'd give me an opportunity to really go through all of the fleets and why I think some are better and some are worse. You can, of course, see the gradient before us between S tier and just remove the damn fleet from the game tier. Now, a lot of people are probably going to be particularly annoyed at some of my choices. These are strictly my opinion. Now, if you disagree with me, comment down below. Please. I love the interaction and I try to comment as best I can. But I think given the amount of time that I've played this game and the amount of work that has gone into the game that I've put into it, that I have a pretty good idea of at least my own cripplingly bad opinions. So we're going to begin with the very first fleet that's really ever been made for the game. It's the Gothic Sector Battlefleet Gothic fleet, the one in the original Blue Book. Now, this fleet set the tone for the entirety of the Imperial Navy as it came after it. Now, a lot of people, I've seen a lot of very vehement and very passionate opinions about this fleet. I've seen people claim that it's outdated. I've seen people say that it's overpowered, and generally, I've seen just a lot of people who don't play the fleet or prefer to play other Imperial Navy fleets because they feel that they have more toys in them. And my opinion is the Gothic Sector list is so slept on. It has access to things that no other Imperial Navy fleet does, like cheap command and the Dominator. No other fleet really has access to these things. I'm going to put the Gothic Sector fleet right up here in A tier. It is a fantastic fleet. Yes, it is far more cruiser oriented. No, you don't have access to some of the later, more really exciting stuff, but you do have access to more Nova cannons than any other Imperial Navy fleet, and you have a very easy to use fleet, especially for new players, and it scales up excellently. You can go up against any other fleet in the game with the Gothic Sector fleet. It's really good. And with that, I'm also going to go and do the Chaos incursion list from the Blue Book as well. And I'm also going to put this up at A tier. The original Gothic incursion list does not have all the bells, horns, and whistles that the other Chaos lists have. And we'll get into those with more detail when we get there. But what it does have is more options in the upgrade zone, more powerful options in the upgrade zone, too. Your command structure works differently, and at least in my opinion, it works better than the later, more up-to-date Chaos lists. Now, unlike the Gothic Sector list, you're not getting anything ship-wise that's unique. You're not getting something like the Dominator. In fact, you're getting fewer ships. You don't have access to a lot of the other stuff. But what you do have is a better series of marks and a cheaper command option, which you simply don't have in the later lists. So sitting right up there at A tier. Now I'm going to pick another one of these guys at random. Actually, I'm just going to go down through the Blue Book. Eldar Corsairs. Now, the Eldar Corsair list caused a lot of people a lot of headaches for a very, very long time. Before 2010, they were widely considered to be either overpowered or underpowered. They were overpowered if you didn't play them, and they were underpowered if you played them, which is one of the most schizophrenic viewpoints you can have in regards to a game. After 2010, they got a couple of modifications that make more of their list more playable, but they are a fleet that is rarely played. Now, this is a escort heavy list. It's also a very fun list. I actually do highly recommend that if you ever get your hands on the original pewter, heaven forbid, the original resin from Forge World, you should absolutely make a physical fleet of these guys because they are so darned pretty. They're among the most beautiful miniatures in the game. Their rules are fun. They are the introduction of the solar sail mechanics of the game, but they are much harder to get a grasp on. If you use them poorly, you will lose almost immediately. It is a high finesse fleet. So I am going to actually, like the other originals, I'm going to put this up at A tier. They have a lot of ships to choose from, especially thanks to the Armageddon book. They have a full run. They have everything from small, reasonably cheap escorts all the way up to a battleship. The only thing that they're actually missing is a Grand Cruiser scale vessel because they have escorts. They have a ton of different escorts. They have two light cruisers, two standard cruisers, and the battleship, which is still a really good thing for an escort heavy fleet. So I give them solid A tier. Going on to the final fleet from the original book are the orcs. Now, the orc raider fleet from the original book is going to be the first thing that's not coming in at A tier. I am actually going to place them down here at D tier. You can use it, and you can use it effectively, but it just doesn't have any. There's no actual reason post Armageddon book to actually use this fleet. You don't have access to a lot of the cooler stuff. You don't have access to all of the amazing ships and options that came down and around through the Armageddon book. It's just not a good list to play unless you're playing a specifically fluffy list from the Gothic War. But it's still a serviceable and usable list. And there are a couple of changes in the rules that make using it okay, but really they're not worth undertaking. And after this, we're really moving into the Armageddon book, the big orange book, as we call it. And I'm just going to kind of pick them as I choose them. Now, this next one is Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade list. Now, this list is a update from the original Chaos list. It has access to it pretty much everything. You have access to all of the Grand Cruisers, you have access to all of the cruisers, all of the battleships. The only thing you don't have access to in this fleet is the character named ships of the four principal chaos lists. So the Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade gives you all the toys. There's no restrictions. Their chaos marks aren't quite as good as the original chaos list, but it is, because you have access to literally everything, it basically lets you just play with all the toys. So I'm going to place it up here at S tier because it lets you play with the toys. You don't have to worry about any irritating rules that may restrict you in taking ships. And if you take Abaddon, there are no restrictions whatsoever. The only downside is your marks in your command structure are either not as good or they're more expensive. So that is the only downside, and it is not much of a downside. Okay, Adeptus Mechanicus. The Adeptus Mechanicus fleet is an offshoot of the Imperial Navy, and as you can see, we have several offshoots of that. But it is by far I would say, the most unique of all of the Imperial navies, so much so that it does stand apart and it plays almost very differently with lots of options and lots of upgrades. It is a very fun list. And the biggest downside to these guys, especially when they were released, is that there were the ships were impossible to get. They were all either pewter, they were horrible molds, they were so terrible, or you could never find them, and they were ridiculously expensive. Now, in the days of 3D printing, that's not even a remote issue. But the actual fleet itself is a lot of fun. And the only downside is because everything is so expensive, you're always going to be outnumbered. But a really talented really talented player can use that to his either disadvantage or advantage. I'm not going to give them S tier because they don't have a really interesting. They only have one unique ship to them. They could have done more. There's room for more interesting stuff in the ad mech. I will give them A tier as a very very fun fleet. Okay, the next one is the Bastion list. Now, the Bastion fleet is a sort of a experiment in the Imperial Navy. It almost feels like a chaos list in many ways. You get a different selection of ships than you normally would have access to. Namely, you have access you have access to the grand cruisers of the Imperial Navy, but the uh, and you have them at very easy access. It's only, two cruisers per grand cruiser. And of course, you have access to the Mars, the Armageddon, and the Overlord. So you have a good selection. But down in the cruiser area, you don't get the Dominator. So people who like to make the argument that the Bastion fleet of the Imperial Navy is just an upgraded Gothic sector, it's really not. You are missing the Dominator, and if you don't have the Dominator, you don't have the Gothic sector fleet. It also has access to it is rather unique because you have access to the Dauntless and the Endeavor family of light cruisers, which is nice. You have a lot of options, but you don't have access to the Oberon. This is more of a template, really, for other more interesting fleets that we'll get to later. It's an okay list, but the real thing that's hamstringing it is that the Imperial Navy Grand Cruisers are just not as good as the Chaos ones. If you want to play a fluffy list or a Grand Cruiser centric list, this is not a bad choice. So I'm gonna put this list in B tier. The Bastion fleets are good and they're fun, but they are not. How do I put it? I feel like that they needed something better to fit in the Grand Cruiser slot to really let it sing and be better. Now, the next one are the Demiurge list. Now, the Demiurge list is a addition from the 2010 FAQ, and it seeks to give the Demiurge a little bit more than just a secondary fiddle to the Tau. Now, unfortunately, the Demiurge list is hamstrung by ship rules that were not really meant to be their own list. The Demiurge were always meant to be a subsidiary of the Tau. There were movements and attempts to make them more interesting, but they were shot down by the people who were making the game. And as such, the Demiurge, as they are in the official rules, in the actual, their actual fleet list, are just not very fun nor competitive. They're interesting and they need more. So they're going to be our very first F tier because they just are missing so much to make them a good list. Now, we are working right now to make them much better in the Book of the Void 2. You should go have a look. There's going to be new updates coming to that, and they're a much better fleet in Book of the Void 2. Now, Dark Eldar. This is another heavily misunderstood fleet because everyone who looks at the Dark Eldar go, but they only have 2 ships. And that's not true. They actually have 2 classes. They have a cruiser and they have an escort, but that escort alone has 4 different configurations. All 4 of them are very, very good. The cruiser has itself 4 different configurations. All of them are good. So it is a very small list, but it is a very dense list. There's a lot you can do, and you have a lot of toys. It is a build-a-ship list. Make no mistake, you have to build your own ship to fit your own design, and there's only one fleet of the Dark Eldar. There's no other iterations. this fleet really did need something bigger than a standard cruiser. It needed a grand cruiser, or it needed a battleship. And they never got it because Dark Eldar, right when they were released for BFG, were falling into obscurity to the point where Games Workshop were considering never making them again. But they did come back. They just never got the update in BFG that they needed. So I'm going to place them in C tier. They are 100% a playable, effective fleet. They just need more. They desperately need more to really stand up to be as good as the other fleets around them. But if you like your Dark Eldar, by all means, get a fleet. And hell, Soulforge Studios has STLs for light cruisers and grand cruisers, so you can, if you want to pull from a lot of the other supplements, you can have a full fleet. I know I am. Okay, I'm actually going to pause on the Grey Knights and then skip right to the Space Marines because I can't talk about the Grey Knights unless I talk about the Space Marines. So the Space Marine fleet got some really substantial upgrades in 2010. They had their strike cruiser, which at the time was a kind of specialist ship, not that great in space combat, but really good in planetary assault and boarding, upgraded to a really nasty, nasty ship. It is far tougher than a Imperial Navy cruiser of equivalent purpose for a mainline cruiser. It is far more deadly than most Imperial Navy cruisers. It's just a mean fleet now. It is definitely better than it used to be. This may be controversial, and I don't actually like it, but I have to put them up in S tier because there's not a single fleet that does not fear the Space Marine in some way. And if you know what you're doing in a Space Marine fleet, you understand where your firepower is, you understand where your boarding is and how to use it, there's nobody in the game that can stop you. Unless they understand intimately how the Space Marines work and how to beat them. If you want understandings of why I'm putting Space Marines in S tier, I highly recommend you go and watch my videos on how to play Space Marines and my overviews of the ships, because Space Marines are absolutely vicious. Now, actually, you know what? No, I'm going to keep that. Keep it in S. Yeah. Okay, so now we can go to the Grey Knights. So you say, I heard you said you like Space Marines. What if I made Space Marines even better? What if I made it so these Space Marines completely ignore all the marks of chaos? What if I told you that they have similar rules to Tyranids in boarding? If I told you that, would you believe it? Yeah, well, that's what the Grey Knights are. The Grey Knights are another S tier fleet. Now, the Grey Knight list needs to be properly updated and put into the fleet list remastered. It is there. There is a link to the full fleet that will be put into it. But let me give you the overview. Yes, you are heavily restricted in the number of strike cruisers you can take. In a 1,500-point list, you're getting no more than 3. But if you know how to use Space Marines, you shouldn't be taking a huge number of them anyway. You should be focusing on your escorts. So it is a excellent, phenomenal, wonderful fleet, and it's a lot of fun to play. It is higher skill than standard Space Marines, but that does not mean that it is by any means bad. It is 100% an S tier list if you know how to use it, because it's just Space Marines but better. All right, Battlefleet Cadia. Battlefleet Cadia is one of the least well-known fleets. It utilizes the Bastion list, but it has a unique command structure. Because so many people are dying at Cadia stands, by the way, so many people are dying at Cadia, including fleet commanders, you can never guarantee that your crews are good. So whenever you roll your leadership, it is you roll 2d6 and pick the lowest between the two. But the advantage is you can purchase veteran commanders, which give a boost to leadership. So Battlefleet Cadia, for those who love playing Cadia and like the Bastion list, this is the most fluffy Imperial Navy list you can ask for, aside from the reserve lists. So I'm going to place Battlefleet Cadia right next to the Bastion lists, mostly because they're effectively the same with a different command structure. They're very fluffy, but you're effectively accepting orc tier leadership, but it's still the Bastionist, and I love good fluff involved with that. So definitely a good B tier list, especially good if you're a Cadia fan. And I know there are a lot of Cadia fans out there. All right, next one on the list, Armageddon Sector. This should be no surprise. The Armageddon Sector smacks right up in S tier. Not only do they have incredible ships, yes, I do not have access to Grand Cruisers, but I have, even if it is limited, I have access to battle cruisers, the Armageddon and the Mars, for every one cruiser. It is a mean-spirited little list, and it's just a lot of fun to play. I played it for ages. You can also take Space Marines in the fleet as their own detachment. It is a wonderful and vicious fleet to play, and it can, again, go up against any other fleet in the game and stand its ground and hold true. It is a great fleet. It also has access to the Apocalypse battleship, and the Oberon, which is amazing. They're amazing ships. All right, the Necrons. Now, this is going to be a little bit hard for me, simply because the Necrons are they're the elephant in the room. Necrons go up against any fleet in the game and can win if you know what you're doing. It's a hard to learn fleet in order to win battles, but when you know it, you can challenge anyone in this game. The elephant in the room is that the lore of the Necrons is so out of date in BFG that unfortunately there's too much missing. They're too small of a fleet. There needs to be more stuff. They've added more stuff, and we can't use it because it's impossible to convince the community to actually bring some of these really, really needed fleets up to date on an official level. BFG is probably the most conservative of all of the specialist games out there. Nominally, if you asked me this question, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I would call them solid A tier. I'm going to have to be, not because that they're bad at the game, they are fun, but because they're so disjointed from their lore, I'm going to have to put them down in C tier. We need to do something about the Necrons and the Votan, the Demiurge / Votan. These two fleets, beyond all of the other fleets, need to be changed to bring them up to even the most simple of modern standards. Oh dear. Okay, Battlefleet Baka. Now, it goes right here. And this is because of all of the things that came out of the 2010 FAQ. Battlefleet Baka was the dumbest thing that they added. They had a theme. They refused to adhere to the theme. They listened to wish listers. And as a result, Battlefleet Baka is not any different than any other Imperial Navy fleet beyond the point that it can take more upgrades and have just as much launch capacity. It is not meant to have launch capacity. It is not meant to be able to take any launch capacity, period. And yet they have access to more carriers than they should. You can easily take dictators as reserves. You can take your battle cruiser option, whatever the hell that awful ship is that I absolutely hate. I'm going to actually scroll down and try and find that abomination. Because it's awful. The Dominion. You can take the Dominion. You can take the Jovian. You can take all of these huge launch capacity ships. So what the heck is the point? Answer: there is no point. It was meant to be something cool, and then they've ruined it because too many people paid too much attention to people who didn't understand what this game is about. This, it's so damn sad. Now, for those people who like Battlefleet Baka, I'm sorry, this fleet needs help. This fleet needs to be either removed from the game entirely or completely renovated. And even the oldest members of this community stand by that statement. Now, moving on. Okay, the Inquisition. Now, this does tie in to the Grey Knights, but the Inquisition is sort of its own fleet. It is a more of a modification to other Imperial Navy fleets, but it unto itself does technically constitute a fleet with a unique command structure and modifications. It's actually a really interesting way to play the Imperial Navy and Space Marines on top of that. I'm going to give them. They also do bring some really cool ships and very fluffy ships. You want a black ship in your fleet if you play in a campaign because of the benefits it brings you. So I am, in that particular regard, going to bring. Oh, I actually may have made a mistake here because that's not right. That's Space Marine. Okay, now that I fixed that, that's Rogue Trader. Inquisition. That's not Inquisition either. That's another Imperial fleet. This is the reserve list. My apologies. I'm mixing all this up. Reserve lists, the reserve fleets. This is A tier. An Imperial Navy fleet that has access to the Repulsive, the Murder, and I believe the Carnage is the coolest dang thing ever. Now, you can't use them very effectively, but it's still super cool. And it's such a fluffy list. Now, and not only that, I cannot stress enough how good the Repulsive Grand Cruiser is in an Imperial Navy fleet, along with the Executor, which is basically a pocket apocalypse. You also get the Hades, the Murder, and the Carnage as reserve options. This is a really fun fleet. More people should play it. It also opens up for a lot of really cool painting opportunities because all of these are going to be ancient, old, weathered ships. You could practically have a ghost fleet like this. So the reserve fleets of the Imperial Navy, 100%, definitely A tier. Okay, sorry about the other two. I'll get to them. It looks like Inquisition's at the very last. I'll do Inquisition now. As I was saying, Inquisition is a fun way to play other fleets, and they do have some really cool ships. The Black Ship is really cool. They aren't necessarily a fleet unto themselves. I'm going to give them a B tier because they can turn any other fleet into a really, really cool themed fleet. And they have some really nice ships involved, too. Okay. The original Tau Mercantile list. Now, again, this is 100% functional, effective, good fleet. This is a fun fleet. This fleet used to win all the dang time at campaigns all over the place. The downside is if you take this list, you are hamstringing yourself because you do not have access to all of the other cool stuff. It's a lot like the original Orc fleet, and therefore it goes in D tier. It's just another. It's everything about this fleet was copied by the Tau Combat fleet, which will be coming up soon, and there's really no difference. So it's going to actually sit at D tier. But it's still functional. You can still use it, and I will still use it in my fluffy games. Now, Rogue Trader, that's who these guys are. The Rogue Trader lists. Now, this also kind of fits in with all of the wolf pack and pirate fleets that focus around the periphery of the Imperial Navy. These are astoundingly fluffy and very, very fun, but highly challenging lists to play. They're very unique. You have a lot of really crazy stuff in them. A lot of people never play them because they view them as underpowered. They aren't. Again, people don't understand the oomph of escorts, especially alien escorts. They're so good. I'm going to put this, however, at... I'm going to put all of these ancillary tiny little weird fleets in C tier, mostly because I feel like a lot of these things are just not fully fleshed out. They're missing some stuff, but they're very good and they're 100% usable. They just need more. They need more access to crazier stuff. Now, the Tau Commerce Protection Fleet, which completely encompasses the entirety of the Mercantile Fleet. The Commerce Protection Fleet of the Tau is a huge, beautiful fleet. The ships look gorgeous. The old ships look great too. They're a 100% A tier list. They do again suffer from a lot of elements that they suffer from certain elements of modernization as well, but they're a big fleet. There's a lot of stuff in them. They're a lot of fun. 100% A tier list. Okay, Yandin. the Craft World Eldar list. Now, the Craft World Eldar list is another take on Eldar, and it's a fun take. They're a little more durable, they're a little more constructible, you can do a little bit more with them. It's a good time, and their ships are very pretty. I'm going to put them also here at A tier with their Corsair cousins. They are really, really good. They're very expensive. They're a little, I would say, underpowered. They're kind of missing something. I would say a battleship would be a really good addition to their fleet. They need a hammer, and they don't really have one. Uriel's flagship is okay, but it's missing. It doesn't really have the punch that the Void Stalker has. Okay, the Armageddon fleet. Now, 100% unquestionable S tier. It is the quintessential orc list. It is easy to use, it is easy to understand, it has all the bells, horns, and whistles. It is fantastic. It has tons of ships in it, a lot of unique, really great and fun ships in it. It's just a great time. 100% S tier, so much fun to play. I have never been disappointed by the Orc Wog fleet. All right, Khorne and the Berserker fleet. Now, the Berserker fleet of Khorne, all of the the 4 god lists came out 2010. Okay, this is after the Abaddon's 13 Black Crusade. All of these lists have access to, I think, all of the ships. They just have unique rules that are tied to the Mark of Khorne, and I have to work with them within the context of how they interact with the fleet. Now, the Khorne fleet it's a tough call if it's my favorite one. It's a really, really good fleet. Chaos does so well on the bum rush, if you know what I mean. It is so good at the aggression involved in going fast and ramming itself down the throat of your enemy. It's so hard. I mean, if there was an A+ tier, I would put it in A+ tier. It's the reason why I'm not giving it S tier is that it does limit your tactical options in that regard. I'm going to just go through the Chaos lists next then. The Plague Fleet of Nurgle. The Plague Fleet of Nurgle is a really, really solid fleet for all you Nurgle fans out there. It has access to a phenomenal battleship and really, really good rules. They're hard to remember in the heat of the game, but it's a good list. It's not as good as Khorne, in my opinion, but it does make those crucial ships more durable, which is so important. So it goes right up there in A tier as well. Okay. The Sorceress Fleet of Tzeentch. This is going to be a little controversial, but I have to put it down in B tier. So the reason being, it's all well and good that the Mark of Tzeentch gives you rerolls, and it's the only mark that can't be taken away by the Grey Knights, but it doesn't really have any kind of flavor. Now, the special rules involving the Tzeentch marked ships that you can purchase are really strong, but they don't really fit, in my opinion, the theme of Tzeentch. There's not a lot of, way changing or trickery. It's just it eats something or somebody gets another reroll. It doesn't feel like a Tzeentch fleet, despite the fact that it has all the color and the marking. It's a good fleet, and don't get me wrong, Scion of Prospero is the best of all of the named character ships, without a doubt. It's expensive. It's the most powerful thing on paper. Point for point, there's another ship that's better than it, but it's such a good ship. But it just doesn't feel like it's Tzeentch. And that's why I put it down to B tier, because otherwise it's pretty much identical to any other Chaos list. It could have been better, in my opinion. It's perfectly functional. That's why it's up here in the high end of the list. All right. Now, this is going to be controversial, but it's only because I only relatively recently realized just how filthy this list is. So, Pleasure Fleet of Tzeentch of Slaanesh in S tier. I have never watched in my life more despair go through the face of a Tau player when they realized that their tightly formationed explorer ships couldn't go on any special orders for the majority of the game. Why? I had a demon ship with Siren Song sitting and haunting right in their face. And because the dang ships were so slow, they couldn't get away from the stupid thing. And I basically disabled their entire capacity to play the game with a single demon ship. You could also, get that ability on slaughters and just fly them into enemy formations. They can be crippled all to hell. Still, if you're within 15 centimeters of that ship, you can't go on special orders. And if I'm hitting you from long range, with my long range firepower and you want to brace, sorry, bro, no bracing for you. The sorcerer, the pleasure fleet of Slaanesh, S tier, solely because it does things to your enemy that no other fleet can do. It is just a mean-spirited but very interesting way to play the game. All right, Tyranids. All my Tyranid players are going to be happy to see this. They go right up in there in S tier. They can take on anybody. They're so flavorful. They have unique mechanics that make them uniquely Tyranid. And they're just fun. Everything about them is just fun. Now, I personally don't have a Tyranid list because I don't want to run a spreadsheet while I'm playing the game. But the Tyranid players that I've always encountered have always been some of the best sports in the game because they know moving their shit across the board takes forever. So, Tyranids, definite S tier, mostly because the players that play it are the best people in the game. But also, they can do a lot. They're so customizable. All right, final fleet list. Orc clans. Boom. Right there at the bottom of the list. Right there with Baka. Terrible writing. Very poor manifestation of the concept. It needs to be reworked from the ground up if you want to do this. Attempting to make a bunch of mini fleets inside of a grander fleet is a good idea. The execution was terrible, and what's worse is that nobody is willing to really just start pushing to get this stuff fixed. So it's sad, but no, Orc clans is just not a good list. And whenever you build the Orc clans as a list, you are literally buying the same thing than as the WOG list for a premium. You're paying more. So it's just an awful list. It's just not fun. When I tried to build a list in it, my brain started to melt. Yeah, it's not well written, it's not well conceived, and it's just not fun. So there you go, guys. Now, if I missed any of the fleets, and I may have, there's so dang many of them, but here's your tier list. I mean, a lot more ended up in the S tier than I necessarily anticipated, but still, all of these fleets, except for the stuff down in like F tier and below, are all really worth playing. Now, again, caveat to the Votann/Demiurge. Book of the Void 2 is going to have a much more complete, much more interesting fleet. So if you want to play Votann, don't worry. If you play that list, instantly convert from F tier to A or S tier. But as it stands, in the 2010, without any fan input, after 2010 FAQ, they're just not a complete list. So here you go. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all again in the next video. Have a great one.